All right, everyone, we are live. Welcome to Deprogrammed on Unsafe Space. I'm your host, Carter Laren. I'm joined normally by the bad mamma jamma, Keri Smith, although she's having Google Hangouts problems, so I'm not sure if she's actually here.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. So let's hope you can hear our guest. Today, we are honored to have Zuby on the show. Zuby is the Jordan Peterson of rap. He's the host of the podcast Real Talk with Zuby and a creative entrepreneur from the UK. But he's been in the news recently because he broke the women's deadlift record in the UK under some triggering circumstances. Zuby, welcome.
Thank you very much, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Really appreciate your time. So why don't you tell people, if they don't know about this video, can you just give a quick overview of what you did that triggered so many people in achieving the championship?
Okay, sure. So I'm Zuby. I'm a professional rapper and creative entrepreneur based here in the UK. So at the end of February, I posted a video on my Twitter account of me doing, it was a 9-second video of me doing a deadlift, which was considerably below my maximum, by the way. 15, but it was 15 kilos above the current British women's record in my weight class, which is the 84 kg weight class. And I posted it up, and then I put a caption saying that I keep hearing about how biological men don't have any strength advantage over biological women. So here's a video of me destroying the British women's deadlift record without trying. And then at the bottom, I wrote, P.S. I identified as a woman while lifting the weight. Don't be a bigot. So according to that logic, I'm now the British women's deadlift champion and also the bench press champion as well, because I did the bench press record for multiple reps. I took both of those records in a single gym session.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite line is "Don't be a bigot."
To be fair, I could have taken those records a good 7 or 8 years ago, but I didn't know that we weren't yet at a level in society where I would have gotten away with it. So I had to wait for my time.
You know, I've been out of shape for a few years. I'm not in my peak shape anymore, but it's an incentive to start going back to the gym if I can start claiming titles. So you've inspired me.
I'm glad. My motto, my slogan is desire to inspire. So I'm glad.
Excellent. So why do you think, I just want to really quickly talk about, so I think what happened was, that video went viral and people who hadn't heard about you, I think, like me, or discovered you. But then I think people have stuck around because you really are willing to talk about a lot of the issues that people feel like they wish people were talking about, and having honest discussions, and just aren't. So you didn't end with this, pointing out the hypocrisy in the radical trans movement. You started talking about a lot of other things. Why do you think that right now is a time when people are so charged around these things and people aren't talking about, let's just, even this trans issue, people aren't getting into the real effect it would have on women's sports and all that kind of stuff. They're putting you in a category. You're either on our side or you're not.
Mm-hmm. You're a progressive or you're a bigot, and that's it. Nothing in the middle.
Yeah.
So that tweet going viral, I've been talking about this stuff for a while. Obviously that was the thing that got onto a lot of people's radar because it got, I don't even know how many retweets. That tweet did millions of impressions. The video's got 1.5 million views now. So I've been speaking about, from about early last year, early 2018 on public forums, but especially on Twitter, I started becoming a lot more vocal about my opinions and positions on certain things. It's something that I've done in private for a long time. I'm a bit of, I guess, a heterodox thinker. I'm generally one of those people who, I don't know, if I'm in a room with 10 other people, I'll be the one who's like rocking the boat and disagreeing on any whatever topic is at hand. I normally find myself in the minority of at least openly expressing my viewpoint. There are millions of people who think like I do. I don't have any crazy radical or extreme opinions or anything like that. But to answer your question directly, I just think despite living in such free societies, I'm in the UK, in the US and Canada, we live in some of the freest countries in the world. But despite that, there's a whole lot of self-censorship which is going on. You know, I think people just feel cowed to talk about certain subjects or to talk about them from a perspective that does not go along with the orthodoxy. And when I say the orthodoxy, that's not even necessarily what most people believe. Like, I think there's a silent majority, but there are people on certain fringes and with certain ideas and ideologies who are very, very aggressive in putting them across, very, very aggressive in calling people names who don't go with them. And I think people just don't want their head on the chopping block. You know, people know that the nail that sticks out gets the hammer. And I get so many DMs, emails every day, and have done since last year, of people, from students, from academics, from journalists, from people in the music business. I mean, I've had calls from people in music who are like, dude, like, thank you for,
yes,
you're saying everything I want to say, you know what I mean? But like, I'm worried about losing gigs or losing opportunities or whatever. And again, I'm not saying anything that's super crazy out there. I'm just challenging some of the ideas that I don't think are sound and that are not, you know, in the long term, that I think are potentially dangerous. I mean, this whole transgender sport thing, I started sounding the alarm on this in around 2012, 2013. Well, that's one of the first couple cases I saw it actually happening. And I was like, well, according to this logic, there's no reason why this won't happen. I mean, sports are very competitive. People want to win. So, you know, you see people use performance enhancing drugs, people do blood spinning, people do all kinds of things to get an advantage to win in sport because it can be lucrative and there's a lot of glory and everything like that. So if a sports division in any given sport were to make it as simple as, whether it's just self-identification or even if it's just relatively short-term hormonal therapy or something like that, which would then allow a biological man to compete against women, that's a danger. That's a danger. That's not, to me, a step forward. That's a step backwards, because we do know that, you know, physically men are bigger, stronger, faster. We've got testosterone. So there is a physical difference. There's a reason why the sports are segregated to begin with. And you can look at certain sports. I mean, imagine American football, rugby, boxing, MMA. There's a whole bunch of sports where this could actually be genuinely dangerous. And it's one of those things that I think sometimes people with good intentions, I'm hoping, I like to assume people have good intentions, but I think sometimes people either just don't know the facts or they're so blinded by the ideology that they're not really thinking about what the long-term implications of some of the things they're suggesting are.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, no, that's my point on that.
So I have a question for you about your background. Can you hear me, Zuby?
Can you hear me?
I
was just saying I finished my point on that.
Oh yeah, I don't think he can hear me, Carter. Ask him.
Yeah, can you hear Keri, Zuby?
I cannot hear Keri. No.
Oh, okay.
That explains why.
There we go.
I think you were going to ask Keri. I can hear you. I think you were going to ask about his background. Were you going to ask about growing up in Saudi Arabia? What were you going to ask about? Tell me and I'll ask him.
Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. I was just going to say, because my former ideology is what I call SJW, belief system. And we talk about that a lot on this program. And I'm just recently coming from that perspective. And so I'm just wondering, does he consider himself conservative? Like, how would he describe himself?
I'll ask him. Sorry, Zuby. We're doing half duplex weird communications.
No
so Keri comes from one of the reasons this program is named Deprogrammed is Keri used to be a social justice warrior, and she's kind of recently, I won't say come to Jesus, although I think that's also true for her.
Yes, that is true.
But she's recently started to realize the dangers of the social justice ideology. And she was just asking about, you know, how do you identify politically and philosophically? And, you know, what's your background that has led you to look at things from what I consider a pretty rational, logical perspective, but it seems like that's not really how people look at things anymore. So what's your background and your path here?
Wow. I mean, it's hard to state. I mean, I think I'm pretty normal. I mean, I'm normal in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, I'm not. I've got a very unique background. So in terms of where I'm from, I mean, I was born in the UK in England. I grew up in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. I went to school there for a while, which is why I don't really sound English. And then I came back to the UK for school. I went to university here. I studied computer science at Oxford, graduated. And then I've now been a full-time musician for about 7 years. So I think that part of it is, I mean, I've always been very independent minded. I've always been someone who's quite hard to sway and who tends to influence people a lot more than I get influenced. So I think I'm a little bit siloed in a way. So being an independent musician, working for myself, being self-employed, and being very self-reliant, and also just not being deprogrammed in a way, as in like I don't have a television in my house. I don't watch TV. I do just my own thinking and come to my own conclusions, and it's hard to, you know, if an argument is better than mine, or someone provides facts or evidence or something, and it changes my mind, then that's happened on some very, very large issues. But I'm not very emotional as well. I'm like very, very unemotional. Not to like a not to like a crazy level, but I'm in literally the bottom 2% of if you've ever done a personality test with the trait neuroticism, I'm in the bottom 2% of the population. So I'm not, when it comes to like arguments, whether it's online or offline or debates or whatever, when people are screaming at each other and getting all offended and emotional, it doesn't affect me very much. I'm just very much like, okay, what are the facts? What makes sense? I don't really care what you feel. Like, what are the facts? So I've been like that. That's just kind of my personality. So beyond that, it's a little bit difficult to say what it is that makes me how I am. It's just how I'm wired.
So there's an argument now, though, that this and it's fun to talk to you. Frankly, part of the reason that it's fun to talk to you about some of these issues is because there's an expectation that because you're a Black rapper, you're supposed to have a particular perspective, which is not the perspective that you seem to have. So, you know, one thing that we're hearing a lot, at least in the US, I don't know if it's in the UK, but we're hearing that logic and reason are tools of oppression by white people. Can you describe? Have you heard this? And
I unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, I have. I've heard some stuff that just makes me shake my head at the world.
So how is that? How is that as a Black man? How could you possibly be embracing the tools of white oppression?
Beyond laughing, that's the thing. I don't even know how to begin to deal with people.
No, I think that's the only proper response.
Honestly, it's just I don't know. You know, I've even heard of science and science and reason and logic. All these things are tools of white supremacy or something like that. I don't know who's giving these weird sociologists and whatnot, like, not I don't want to say a platform, because I think everyone should have a platform, but I don't know why they're taking some of these ideas and ideologies seriously, because so many of them are just stupid and nonsensical. And I find it amazing that people are going to university and paying 5 figures to be brainwashed in some of this stuff just to come out and be useless people. I wouldn't, like I said, I would just laugh at that, because it's so ridiculous that there's no there's nowhere to go from there if someone really genuinely believes that.
Keri, do you want to try your audio again really quickly? Oh, I can't even hear Keri now.
Oh no.
So Google hates her. So
did she say the wrong thing?
What about now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now. I can hear you now. Zuby, can you hear her now though?
I can't. No. I can't see her either.
Oh, you can't see her either. Yeah.
No, I can't see her on the Hangout thing.
So I have got a bunch of stuff I could talk to you about, but actually I don't get to talk to musicians very often. I've talked to evolutionary biologists, so we could get into the differences between men and women, but I actually want to talk to you about music because there's not a lot of people that can talk about music. And maybe we can start with your rap, because your rap, I've never been much of a rap listener, except for this. Maybe we'll be dating myself, but back in the day when it was like Young MC in the 80s, like the early rap stuff.
Okay.
But part of the thing that's been a turnoff has been the kind of glorification of violence and self-destructive and actually just generally nihilistic behavior that's glorified in rap. But listening to your stuff, first of all, it's more educated, probably because you went to Oxford, but also it's got a positive message. And I'd wonder if you can talk about that a little bit and why you rap the way you do. I mean, in your songs, you talk about being the Jordan Peterson of rap. You have a line that says, too much love, I could never be a feminist, which I think would require a lot of unpacking. So
Oh boy,
what's can you talk about your music in particular a little bit, and then I want to dive into music generally.
Yeah, sure thing. So my music, my sort of MO in life is, especially as I get older and wiser, is really honesty and authenticity. I try to be as those are two qualities I really value in other people, and I'm one of those people who I really try to just embody that from the beginning of my music career. When I started out as a teenager, I've never ever, like, you can't find a song of mine where I'm rapping about being a gangster or selling drugs or coming from the hood or anything like that. Because from the beginning, I was like, I'm just going to be true to myself. This is who I am. I'm going to just put it on the table there. That's why it's part of why I'm so outspoken on a lot of things. I'm just like, look, this is who I am. This is what I think. I'm not going to bow down to anybody or be controlled by anybody. And in terms of the, being positive, one, I am a very positive person. I'm generally an optimist. I'm someone who tries to see the positive of any situation, even if it's difficult, even if it's ugly, anything like that. I try to, it's easy to get annoyed with people if you're spending too much time on Twitter or something like that. But in real life, I'm very chilled. I get on with pretty much anybody. Like, for me not to be able to get on with someone, they have to just really not be a decent person. And I think, there's so much negativity out there, as you already alluded to, in the world of music and just the world in general. There's a lot of negativity out there. You go on Twitter, it's negative. You go on, you watch the news, it's negative. You read the news, there's negativity. And, life is difficult. As Jordan Peterson would say, life is suffering. And that's true. We've all got things internally and externally that we struggle with. And I think one great thing about art and music in particular is that, I think what I love about being a rapper, being a musician, is it's a little bit like stand-up comedy. It's being able to articulate in words what other people are feeling and will resonate with. So I just think it's important to be a counterbalance. With a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, it's kind of about a counterbalance. So if you are going to have all that music talking about degenerate stuff and talking about violence and, having tons of profanity and all that kind of stuff, I think it's good to have a counterbalance to it, an alternative point of view, something that people can listen to. And what I love about my music is, like, I can play it to anybody and not feel embarrassed, right? I can do it. I had a show last night. My parents came to the show, and I'm happy to have my parents at the show because I know I'm not on stage saying some stuff that they wouldn't be proud of. You know what I mean? I can play it to my aunties, and I can play it to little kids. I can play it to anybody, and I'm not worried about, if I send a song to radio, I don't even need to edit it because I don't swear in my music. So
I was going to ask you about that. That's
okay.
But put a pin in that. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, man, it's about all those things. It's about being authentic. It's about wanting to inspire and motivate people in a positive way. I do want to be a positive light on the world. My North Star, my big goal, is to have a positive impact on over 10 million people. That's my lifetime goal. I want to do that through my music, through my words, through my writing, all the things that I'm going to go on to do in the future. That's my big goal, have an impact on 10 million people, and then I can die happy. So yeah, I'm not going to do that by rapping about shooting people and selling drugs and stuff, because I don't do that. I don't condone that. I'm entirely opposed to all that. And yeah, that's out there, that exists, but it's not my thing. It's never going to be my thing. I might listen to a little bit of it here and there for entertainment purposes, but that's not going to be the message that I'm ever communicating, and I don't want to be.
Yeah. So, you've said before you've got somewhat of a privileged, you had a privileged upbringing or privileged background, I think is the phrase that you used. But a lot of rappers are rapping about, what their experience is. And I've also heard you say there's kind of a fine line between glorifying something and documenting what's happened and what the experience is. Do you think that most modern rappers, or a lot of modern rappers, are erring on the side of glorification rather than sort of psychologically processing difficult or traumatic childhoods?
I do think so. I do think it's shifted a little bit. I think in the 90s, even in the early thousands, not all of it, but a lot of the gangster rap, or, the stuff that was more violent, or, talking about someone who's maybe dealt drugs in the past or something like that, it did seem to always have more of a silver lining around it. It was more like, look, this is what I was doing. this is what was going on there, and this is where I am now, right? There was more of a redemption narrative, shall I say?
Yep.
Like it wasn't just like making it sound really cool to do these things. It was like, look, you know, Jay-Z has a line in a song which is great where he says, Hove did that, so hopefully y'all don't have to go through that, right? So like, this is what I did in the past, but hopefully, you know, I went through this, but hopefully everyone else won't have to, kind of thing. And not in, I don't like to, I try to avoid generalizations. I mean, there are certainly a lot of artists who are still putting out very positive messages out there. I'm not the only person. But yeah, there does seem to be a rising tide of stuff just being super ignorant with no redemption narrative at all, right? Just making it sound really cool to take drugs or sell drugs or be in a gang or whatever. Like it is crossing that line, in my opinion, into glorification. And you know, people are, I'm a free speech absolutist. People are welcome to do that if they want to. People can listen to it. We've all got choices, but I think it's yeah, again, I would just rather be again, it's never been my desire to kind of play into any of that, you know, not to play into any of that. It's like, look, this is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is what I think. And, you know, people can agree with me. People can disagree with me. People can like it. People can dislike it. But it's just like, look, this is who I am. This is what I want to say. And yeah, it's kind of that simple for me.
Have you talked about yet? Can you hear me now? No?
I don't know. She's trying again.
Ah, man. Oh,
no,
well.
I can't. Occasionally it says that she's joined, but then there was one moment when her face popped up. Then, you know, I can see her, but I can't hear her.
You can see me, but you can't hear me. That makes me so sad.
She's very sad. She's communicating her sadness.
No.
So
I can literally see her, but I can't.
Why do you think there's been a rise in nihilism? Because you were saying that this has happened, I think you said late 90s, maybe even early aughts. There was maybe more of a redemption narrative in rap music. Where's the rise in nihilism coming from? Because it's not like the plight of urban America has gotten, or urban the UK, I imagine, I don't know, has gotten worse. It's not like things have gotten worse. Why is there this sudden rise in the glorification of violence and nihilism generally?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's on the supply side or on the demand side. Like I look at a lot of things quite economically. You know, when people are like, oh, why do rappers rap about this? Or why are so many video games violent? Or why are so many movies like this or whatever? And I'm always like, well, there's clearly demand. People are buying them. People are paying money for them. People are consuming them. So as long as that's going to happen, people are going to keep, you know, it's like people who sell drugs, right? If people didn't want drugs, nobody would sell drugs. There'd be no profit in it. So, yeah, it's hard to pinpoint. I would say that as a society in general, I do think that Western society has become a little bit more decadent and nihilistic maybe in the past 15 to 20 years.
What would you attribute that to?
It's hard, man. I think there's a few factors. I think there's a bunch of factors. If I were to sum it up, I'd maybe say like a lack of meaning and a lack of direction. It's the same reason why I think someone like Jordan Peterson, it resonates with so many people. Because, you know, if you're familiar with his content, I mean, a lot of what he says would have just been considered common sense 40 years ago, I imagine. Right?
It wouldn't have been that Dad would have said back in the day.
Exactly. It wouldn't have been so groundbreaking, but now it seems so groundbreaking just because it's like for the past 20, 30 years, the messaging has just been so, just do whatever you want. And morality is subjective and nothing is really right and nothing is really wrong. And just have fun. Let your genitals guide you. Don't let God guide you. Religion is terrible. You know, all these things, you know, I do think all these things kind of play into each other. And then I think with social media as well, in the past, you know, the rise of that over the past 12 years or so, you know, I think people, people have become more narcissistic. People have become we're better connected, but people are more lonely. You know, I think that's also linked to the whole rise in what seems to be mental health problems. You know, I think all of these things are interconnected. I don't know what the source is. If there's any one, I imagine it's a whole bunch of factors, and then they all kind of play into each other. So, and then I think that gets reflected on the wider culture. That'll get reflected in what's showing on TV. It'll get reflected on what you're seeing on social media. the videos you're seeing on YouTube, the music you're hearing, it'll all, all these things are kind of products of the culture, shall we say.
So you've talked before about like this is related. Trust me. You've talked before about how Nazism is generally viewed as horrible, as it should be, and evil, but communism is given a pass, and you don't learn. And so I think you talked once in an interview about you don't learn all the horrible atrocities of communism in school as much as you learn about the Holocaust. And when you were talking about, I was thinking that there must be a philosophical and kind of ideological underpinnings to why we have educational institutions full of people who don't want to talk about communism in a negative light. And I imagine it's the same root as maybe the nihilism that we're seeing in pop culture.
It might be. I think it's a couple of things. I think some of it is political because, going back to World War II, obviously, countries like the UK, the Allies were, somewhat aligned with the Soviet Union. So it was in their favor, even at that time, decades ago, it was in their favor to kind of sweep under the rug some of the atrocities that were going on there and not report them to the people. And so I think that's a factor that because, those were people who were on our side to at least to some extent, not throughout the entire thing. I'm not a World War II expert, but I think that's part of it. And then I think that sort of led to that knowledge just being kind of swept under the rug a little bit. So it doesn't have the same. If you hear communism and you hear Nazism, you don't get the same like emotional. They don't.
Right.
There's not the same emotional response.
You put on a Che shirt and call everyone Hitler as an insult, and
exactly. If you saw someone in the street wearing a red T-shirt with the hammer and sickle on it, you'd have a really different response to if you saw someone wearing a black T-shirt with a white swastika on it. Okay, like it's not. And the former killed more than the latter. But
I was going to say the death toll is a lot higher.
Exactly right. Yeah, but and people don't even want to accept that because people want to think that all the atrocity comes from far right ideology. People don't. Have you ever seen the media use the term far left?
No, not even to describe like Antifa.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They're anti-fascist. They're fine. They're not. And it's amazing. You see people labeled as far right. I've said far right, like you see it, but I literally can't think of ever seeing in any paper, except for some of the like very conservative ones. Nothing gets labeled as far left, right? You never hear of far left extremists, Antifa or far left extremists. You don't hear anything about that. Like people aren't even familiar with the term. People are like, far left, what does that mean? Does that just mean you're a really nice guy? And it's like, no, it doesn't.
Nice as Stalin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not what it means. And I didn't learn about a lot of this stuff until, I had to dig it out myself, in my 20s. It wasn't until my 20s. And I started, hearing a little bit about it and doing some more research and being like, okay, why did communism completely fail? And why has it failed in all these places? And what really happened? And so I looked into it. I looked into, Pol Pot's China, the Soviet Union, Cambodia, all these places where the same model has been tried under the same pretense. And I was like, wow, this is shocking. How can people go on TV and proudly call themselves communists when this is you can't go on TV and proudly say that you're a Nazi,
right?
But you can go on TV and, you can literally say, yeah, I'm a communist, and no one, a couple people might be like, ooh, but people aren't going to have the same horror.
Even separating them ideologically is somewhat dishonest because they are both based on collectivist mentality and large government. It's just they just have different mechanisms for implementing it. But they're ideologically much more similar than like if you're a I don't know what your
pretty libertarian
are, but like if you're a libertarian, communists and Nazis have way more in common with each other than either of them do with libertarianism.
Yeah, I think it's that something like Nazism, what's wrong with it is very obvious, right? It's on the surface level, right? You're saying this race is superior than other races, and therefore the lesser ones
gonna murder them.
Need to be. Yeah, we're gonna. That's very clear. Okay, communism is saying from each, according to his ability, to each according to their need, right? We just want
Sure.
we want equality of outcome,
Right.
We want equality, right? And on a surface level, I mean, I've had to explain this to so many people, right? When someone is seeking equality of outcome, and I'm trying to explain to them why that's a really bad goal, because it's not. It takes a couple layers of thinking to understand why equality of outcome is a bad goal, right?
Well, I mean, there is a way to do it. Pol Pot achieved it with the killing.
You can kill everybody. Yeah, you can kill everybody.
Then you're all equal.
Yeah, you can make sure everybody starves. But and that's what always inevitably happens long term. But again, I think the lack of education and knowledge, plus the fact that it's just you've got to dig a couple levels to understand why it's so dangerous. So I think that's why, again, you always that one, it's kind of like a zombie, right? I think like Nazism is like almost nobody is a Nazi. I know people like to throw it, but the actual people who genuinely think that's a good idea, they are very, very, very tiny in number and very, very fringe, and are rightfully shunned by people on all sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah, I would say they're immediately ostracized as soon as they're exposed.
Exactly, right? You're not going to have a Nazi in the Republican Party or the Conservative Party, and they can just chill there, right? If they get found, no, they're getting cast out. Right. Whereas you could have someone who's like pretty extreme far left in a left wing party, and no one will really, like there isn't the same. No, there's not the same thing. And again, I think it's just the it's not as emotionally and obviously striking what is wrong with it, but it's been tried enough times that I think people should kind of like just draw that line and be like, okay, the right answer is somewhere in the middle, right? The right answer is normally somewhere in the middle, right? You don't want to go to too far an extreme on any axis of a political spectrum, where you're just going to end up with chaos.
Yeah, although I would argue the axes need to be redefined. I would say I would probably put communism and Nazism at one end and anarchy at the other, and start having that conversation.
I tend to look at it like the quadrant.
Yeah.
So you've got like authoritarianism at the top, and then anarchy at the bottom, and then you've got like total free market capitalism on the right, and then you've got communism on the left. So that's more how I view it. But I do think, I mean, it's why I'm not even I'm fairly libertarian, but I'm not like an anarchist who's like, okay, I just want to completely get rid of the state, dismantle the legal system, get rid of government, and again, that's, to me, that's as much of a pipe dream as having the whole USA run under communism and everybody is happy, right? I mean, the answer, like I said, it's somewhere in the middle. You don't want to live in a complete authoritarian state. I mean, I grew up in a theocracy, right? I lived in Saudi Arabia for 19 years. So, and even there, that's not even like, that's probably one of the most hardcore countries in the world in certain ways. But, it's like, it's still not as absolute and extreme as it sort of could be, if you see what I mean. And I just think if you go totally on any end, then they've all got their own pathologies, and you do need to, I'm generally a free market capitalist, but I recognize that you wouldn't want to have Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft all merging into one mega corporation that just owns the world and is more powerful than any government. I understand that, you don't want to let people just pollute as much as they want with no repercussion, or there are certain things, certain checks and balances that I'm like, okay, that's reasonable. I don't really care what side an idea comes from. It's kind of like, okay, what works well for society. And I think what works from country to country is going to vary. If you take you take a country that's got 2 million people in it, I don't know. Oh, let's go to an extreme. Iceland, 300,000 people in the whole country. So what works in Iceland is not necessarily what's going to work in the USA, which has 12 times the population. No, more than that, like 15 times the population. So you've got to, So I think I don't know. I think you've got to weigh it up and see what works well. In the in the UK, we've got the NHS, so we have we've got essentially universal healthcare in the UK. I generally think that it's got its flaws, but you've got that, and then you've also got the option of private, so you've got both options. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm like, okay, cool, that seems to work. That seems to work pretty well. And I can, again, coming back to capitalism again, I can understand why in something like healthcare you might not want to let the free market completely dictate anything. It might work. I don't know. It might work. But I can see how there can be, just because of the way the incentives are structured, you might end up having, I don't know, certain drugs costing crazy prices, or certain people just being, you know, getting sick or having an emergency and end up just getting screwed because they haven't got. I can recognize all these things, right? I'm not stuck to any ideology. That's why I don't like to label myself. I say I'm like libertarian leaning, if I had to, you know, libertarian leaning, conservative leaning on some things, liberal leaning on some other things by the true definition of liberalism anyway. So, you know, that's why I just, you know, say free thinker. And which other people even try to criticize. They're like, no, you must label yourself. And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to be completely against something like socialized healthcare just because that is the, I don't know, that might be the mandated conservative or libertarian position, right? It's like, okay, I've seen countries, not just the UK, but elsewhere in Europe where this thing, it works, right? So, and people are generally happy to pay into something for healthcare, right? You might not want to, again, you don't want to go as far as nationalizing everything and, you know, having the government run everything. We don't want that. But I don't know. I think it's just like with other stuff. I just try to take a common sense approach. And if I'm provided with something that evidence that something works or something doesn't work, it's like, okay, cool. Like we can do that one. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's scrap that one. Let's adjust that one. So yeah, that's my general thoughts on it.
Well, hey guys, I'm going to try one more time just to see. Last time to join. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Keri's trying to talk to you one more time. It doesn't sound like it's working.
Tell him I said.
No, it's so annoying. I can see her. But,
he sees you, Keri, but
I'm
I
sorry.
can see her laughing.
I'm thoroughly enjoying.
Jump in the chat, Keri. And
I'm going to go submit my questions in the chat like a lowly.
I'm wondering if there's like something I need to switch.
Okay.
Well, no. So this is you sound like a pragmatist more than anything, and you know, full disclosure. Sometime I'll argue with you at some later time in the future, another time about. I'm actually an anarcho-capitalist. I mean, ultimately,
okay.
I am an anarchist, but I don't think it's practical to do today because I think it's I think politics is an emergent property of culture, which is why you have different cultures around the world able to have different political systems that work. So I'm trying to move culture in the direction where we're okay with anarchy, but I wouldn't vote for it tomorrow. Not that you vote for anarchy, because I think it would be a mess.
How would you ever see it working out of interest?
Well, ultimately, I view anarchy as really just a consistent application of the non-aggression principle. So if the initiation of the use of force is wrong, then it's wrong in every and all case. And ultimately, the government is an initiator of the use of force. But I think actually in an anarcho-capitalist society, you might actually have more restrictions. You may end up feeling pretty regulated. Actually, it would just be all voluntary. So you'd have insurance companies that would, you know, not insure risky behavior or charge higher premiums for super risky behavior, and you'd have, you know, a lot more of ostracism from the socioeconomic system through contracts as punishments than you would the state doing things. But you know, my general argument is
what about international affairs? That's one thing I'm curious about.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's another issue that depends on really what the international environment is at the time. So if you have an anarcho-capitalist group and there are threats from the outside, you know, we would fund, like I would voluntarily fund actual defense, but I don't want to fund dropping bombs on the Middle East and like starting wars. Like that's not, I don't want to do that, but I'm forced to do that because I live in a society where we've got this, you know, I don't want to get weird conspiratorial. I'm not, but there is a military industrial complex. And
of course. Yeah.
You know, that's a thing.
Presidents have talked about that. So,
yeah. So, well, Eisenhower, I think, invented the term, right? So, but anyway, you know, to me, it's not a primary. I don't think the arguing over a political system is of primary importance. I think the philosophy and culture is more important to talk about because I do believe that ultimately drives all the politics. I want to circle back to music though, because there's you're the only person I think that I know that I can have this discussion with who might have some insight because you're a musician. I have a weird theory, maybe more of an observation. And it might just be because I'm an old guy and I like the music I grew up with. So I'll accept that I could be totally wrong about this. But it seems like in the 70s and 80s rock, specifically 70s and maybe a little bit before then, and then kind of weaning out in the 80s, there were masculine rock bands. And it seems like the masculinity has disappeared from music with the exception of hip hop and rap. So I'm there. It tends to be more toxic, right? As we discussed before, it's like shoot people masculinity, but at least
let's not use that term. Let's not use that.
Yeah,
term.
fair. What am I off my rocker? Is that crazy, or has there been a shift in masculinity in music?
There's been a shift in masculinity, general. Period.
Fair.
You know, yeah. I mean, there's been an demasculinization of Western society. There's no question about that. I mean, some of that is, I think some of it is intentional. I think some of it is unintentional. Some of it is just because we are very comfortable. We have been living in peacetime in the West generally,
right,
for several decades now. That's pretty rare. I mean, if you look at history, you know, like pretty much every man was going to be fighting, or, you know, if not part of the army or the military, maybe being a blacksmith that helps to make the weapon, you know, everyone
or hunting,
kind of,
doing something.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. You couldn't afford to not have certain masculine qualities, really. You know, and you probably wouldn't have reproduced if you didn't, because that's not what ladies would be attracted to. But, you know, we live in such comfortable times where you have to, I mean, you literally have to artificially create struggle. I mean, I'm a big gym guy, right? I go to the gym, and that's literally like an artificial version of what some of my ancestors probably were just, yeah, exactly. What they would have just been doing naturally, right? Like, I don't need to hunt. I just go to the supermarket for hunting. So instead I replicate it by going to the gym and running and lifting some weights. And, you know, it's, and then, you know, so linking that back to music, I do think it's a product of the wider culture. Once again, I think that masculinity has been misconstrued and quite unfairly demonized as well. I think that, you know, both the masculine and the feminine traditionally have their potential pathologies, and their, you know, if you go to like the extreme hyper masculine, then that's where you get, you know, like criminals and, you know, people doing crimes and people murdering and raping and pillaging and, you know, doing really awful stuff and going to war and killing each other. Like, it can get very brutal, but that's not like all masculinity is, right? Masculinity is very virtuous. Masculinity is wanting to protect, wanting to provide, wanting to look out for people who are, you know, especially physically weaker and smaller, right? Pretty much every man would, like, you know, happily lay down his life at an extreme for their family, for, you know, their loved ones, whatever. It's just the way we're hardwired, and there doesn't seem to be much of an, I don't know, societally at the moment, there doesn't seem to be much of an appreciation for that. And maybe that's because it's not needed in the current times we live in. Those qualities are not necessarily needed nor rewarded. So people kind of forget about them for a while. You know, if
they will be.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There will be a reckoning.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean, I often joke that, you know, feminists will start appreciating men once a war pops off, right? Like, that's when, or if, you know, if there's an emergency, you know, we call in the patriarchy, don't we? Right? If someone gets whether it's a flat tire or a burning building or a terrorist attack, who do you call? You call the patriarchy, right? You call the completely male dominated people to come in and protect. And
even taxes and supporting social programs requires a bunch of guys with guns, basically.
Yeah. And a bunch of guys with money. Yeah. You know, it's all, I think the problem with a lot of conversations is people only see one side of it, right? So if someone starts going on some tirade about masculinity and toxic masculinity, they'll call out all the negative aspects or all the negative things that men in general or individually have ever done historically or now. And you're completely forgetting about all the stuff that they've created and built, right? Like the roof over your head, like the microphone that I'm talking into, right? So many things that, you know, this is not a diss to women, but men build almost everything that we use, right? The table this is on, right? I can almost assure you all the stuff I'm surrounded by was built by men, and people don't really think about that. The fact that, you know, who's keeping the lights running, who's keeping all this stuff going, you know, and women contribute to society as well, obviously. and you need both of those dynamics to this is why I don't like this I know there's a lot of stuff I don't like, but it's yeah, I don't know, there's like this this pathologizing of both masculinity and also of the feminine as well, right? Trying to merge them and just make them identical. You know, it doesn't mean that there's no crossover, right? Men and women can generally do most of the same things. There are certain things that only women can do. There are certain things that only men can do. And that's fine because we've got both. So a healthy society recognizes this and appreciates both and recognizes that, you know, all are equal, you know, different but equal. Equality doesn't mean identical, right? I think that's where stuff gets muddied because people are expecting, again, you come back to that equality of outcome thing. People look at something and say, oh, there's more men than there are women here, so there's an injustice. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. Just like
conveniently, they don't look at coal miners and complain about that.
No. I've never
CEOs.
seen only CEOs. No, and not, you know, garbage collectors, ditch diggers, plumbers, electricians, mechanics. I could go on. Lumberjacks.
Right.
You know, I've never heard anyone campaign for have more women in these fields, and that's fine. You know, I don't think the military should be 50-50. Like it wouldn't make sense for multiple reasons. So yeah, so sorry, I went off topic. But coming back to music, I mean, hip hop has always been traditionally masculine. You know, hip hop is a very masculine genre. The vast majority of listeners and artists are male, and I think it's always had that aggression. It's always had that braggadocio.
Is that why it's appealing though? Because society's kind of gone so hyper feminine that men who want some masculine influence, they kind of go to the kind of extreme. They look for, you know, drug dealers and homicidal rappers. I mean, not that you're a homicidal rapper, but you know what I mean?
I'm certainly not. I try to embody the positive masculine.
Yeah,
I think so. Maybe. I mean, it's been popular for a long time, so I don't think it's necessarily a new thing. But I think that, you know, people, both men and women, are drawn to those kind of vibes. It's the same with, you know, like people like, I've never watched Game of Thrones, but, you know, people watch, like, you know, people like stuff like that. People like, you know, superhero movies. People like gangster movies, violent video games, right? All these things they're all kind of similar in that entertainment perspective. Again, we live in such comforting times that it's cool to have something that's, I don't know, that feeds that masculine desire without being actually destructive or harmful to anybody. So you can go and, I don't know, play a first-person shooter and be shooting people's heads off and running around and doing all this horrible stuff that you wouldn't do in real life, but it's cathartic in that sense. So I think that music and other forms of entertainment, I think that can be cathartic for people in the same kind of way. I think it would be interesting for someone to do like a full-blown study of all that, because that's my theory, but it would be interesting to see how it holds up.
Yeah, people tend to instead just glom onto anecdotes and then just draw, you know, wildly reckless conclusions, like, you know, oh, the school shooter watched violent video games, therefore violent video games caused school shooting, or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, people try to make things too simple. They try to think every correlation is a causation and not really look at anything with nuance.
Can we talk about Saudi Arabia for a second? Because I don't know anyone else who grew up in Saudi Arabia. And I view Saudi Arabia, I'll just be honest, I view it as like the devil in the room that no one wants to talk about. Like, we pretend to be friends with Saudi Arabia, but talk about a misogynistic, like, horrible theocracy. I don't know if there's a better example. Maybe Iran. So now that I've said that about where you grew up, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me.
Yeah, it's certainly not my experience. So
I mean, it seems like, but that's, you know, give me. I have no firsthand information about.
Yeah, sure. I think Saudi's a very misunderstood country in a lot of ways. And despite living there for a long time, I wouldn't actually want to say that I'm a total expert at all, because the way I grew up and where I grew up, I lived primarily in an expat community. So where I was more similar probably to like a suburb in middle America than to, you know, growing up in Riyadh or Jeddah or somewhere like that. So, but with that said, of course, you know, I did travel to other cities and, you know, experience life there and stuff. So it's, It's tricky. I mean, a lot of stuff it's very different. A lot of stuff is quite different, right, in the way that people do things. One thing I would say is that it works for them. It works. And you can, it's very, having lived there, you can see how, what's the best way to put it? It's easy, like if you are surrounded by that and you kind of adopt their mindset and you look at a country like the USA or even the UK from their perspective, you can see how they may feel, certain people there will feel as horrified or as negative about certain aspects as you might looking from your own perspective. Okay. So
That's
just
fair.
like, right. So just like people in the West would, for example, you said misogyny. So people would look and see, wow, look, the women are, their women are made to cover up. They can't do this. They can't do that. And some of the, lots of those things are factually correct. Someone who's grown up in that culture, including some of the women, will likely look over to the US or the UK and, and they'll see girls running around, quite close to naked on the street and
Right.
wasted off alcohol and
Sure.
peeing in the street and going home and sleeping with
They'll watch
random
MTV
guys.
and yeah.
And they're just like, what on earth are they like? That's the most degenerate, have they not got any morals? Have they not got any, so
Right.
it's a
Wait,
complex
are you
one.
arguing for moral relativism right now? I want to be clear about what.
Am I arguing for moral relativism? I believe in objective morality for the fundamental stuff. I think that there's a degree of subjective morality, of course. I think that's kind of the honest position. So I think some stuff is objectively morally right and wrong. Right? I think
What are some subjective things?
Subjective things. Oh gosh, there's a lot of them, aren't there?
In morals, I don't know. I've never thought of morals as being subjective. I've thought maybe like tradition or like manners as being subjective, but
yeah,
I'm just trying to understand your distinction.
Yeah, I think I'm generally in the objective camp. Like I think that, slavery is objectively immoral. I think killing innocent people is objectively immoral. Okay, something that's subjective, I would say death penalty. I would say that is quite subjective, right? I'd say killing an innocent person is objective. I'd say something like the death penalty is quite subjective, depending on how you look at it. I mean, well, it is literally subjective because so many people have different, people who agree on lots of other things will disagree on that one.
And maybe what deserves the death penalty, right? So some people would say a serial killer deserves it, but other people would say yes, but so does someone who only rapes, and maybe there's a disagreement there.
I don't know. So I mean, there are lots of moral disagreements in the world, and it changes over time. So the fact that stuff also has changed over time. There was a time when it was perfectly legal to own a slave, and so I would say that objectively that was always wrong. If you go back to biblical times, there's slavery. I would say that objectively that was always wrong. But morality is, I'm not a moral philosopher. I know what my positions on things are. The problem with moral relativism, of course, is that if everything becomes subjective, then it's kind of like you end up in this position where you may as well throw everything else out the window. It's a bit like postmodernism. It's like, okay, well, if everything is a social construct and we can just deconstruct everything, you just end up hopeless and nihilistic, right? It's just kind of like,
you can't even have a conversation because language can be
exactly
deconstructed, and therefore who knows what I'm saying, right?
Exactly, and nothing is factual, and everything is arbitrary. So it's not, to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a very useful philosophy. But yeah, I feel like we've gone off track. But yeah, coming back to Saudi Arabia, I mean, there are certainly, especially as the Western world becomes a bit more degenerate, I can recognize and value and understand why they do some of the things there the way they do them. I would say in a lot of cases it can be too draconian, especially as someone who values liberty. But I think, again, if you give people total liberty, some people will be fine with that and will live well. It was kind of why I was asking about the ANCAP thing, right? I think if
some people will shoot up heroin and do a whole bunch of horrible stuff.
I think if you had a bunch, so Saudi, for example, in Saudi, drugs are completely illegal. You get the death penalty for dealing drugs in Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
There's
including, I assume, like what we would say soft drugs like marijuana, or no?
Yep. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. No drugs, no alcohol. Done. And so people are like, whoa, that's extreme, right? But they don't have all of the problems that that Europe and the USA have when it comes to drugs and alcohol. All the problems that stem from drugs and alcohol, right? You've got this opioid crisis in America. You've got alcoholism. You've got people getting off their faces and killing each other, and and you don't have any of that. None of that exists there.
Yeah.
So again, it's kind of like it's like a balance, right? It's like you go for the full liberty option, especially if you were to say like completely decriminalize drugs, that's like the full liberty option.
Yep.
And then they go to the other extreme and they're like, no, like if you sell a bag of weed here, we are kicking you out the country at best. At worst, you're going to be executed. And that's on the board. Like if you're flying there, like that's on the landing card. The landing card you fill out at the top of it, it says warning, death for drug traffickers, right? It's in the airport. So yeah, so it's hardcore. But that's my thing, and it works. Or people also say, oh, it's terrible that they of course they have capital. It's known for having capital punishment.
Yeah.
Right. But it's so safe there. It's very safe, right? People have this idea. So I'm like, no, it's safe. Like you can, because the deterrent is so strong, right? You're not,
right. Yeah.
If
you're not going to risk it.
No, if you shoplift in the UK, right, you'll probably get like a small fine if you're caught. So, someone who wants to shoplift, it's like, let's weigh up the options. That's not a bad idea. I probably won't get caught. Why not? Saudi, you're going to lose your hand, right? Yeah. If they catch you, you're going to lose your hand. You're going to get lashed in public. You're going to get thrown in prison. You've got to be crazy. Got to be crazy to rob a store. You see what I mean? So it's kind of like, and I think I like the fact that I grew up there and kind of got those different perspectives, because you can see the benefits and the failings of different types of systems.
Do you think it's one of the reasons that you're more of I'll say a clean living kind of guy? You clearly work out. I don't think you do drugs. You don't swear in your rap videos. I don't know what your relationship with alcohol is, but do you think that is a result of your exposure to that lifestyle?
I think it's probably mostly my upbringing. I think it's a factor. I think my upbringing is a bigger factor. I've got fantastic parents, fantastic family, raised me extremely well. Nobody in my family uses profanity. Like none of us, I don't believe, have ever touched drugs. I don't drink at all. Most of my family, will drink a little, but none of them are like right. getting wasted every weekend or anything like that. So I'd say it's primarily my family, and then somewhat cultural. I'm also from my family background is originally Nigerian as well. So again, Nigerian culture is, it's nowhere near as far as, Nigeria is very different to somewhere like Saudi Arabia, but in the sort of liberal conservative spectrum, it would be kind of between that and the modern Western world. So, it's still culturally fairly conservative and stuff like that. And then, and then I think part of it's just my personality. I think the combination of, I don't know how much of each of those things plays into it. But
maybe the low neuroticism makes you less excited about drugs and alcohol. I don't know.
It just doesn't interest me. Me. Like, I don't need that. I love my life. I'm very happy. I'm very positive. I'm very outgoing. I'm an extrovert. I'm not someone who needs to, like, if I'm in a social situation, I don't need a couple drinks to loosen up. It's like, no, I'll be that person who someone thinks is, oh, I want what he's having. And I'm like, I'm not on anything. I'm just like this. Yeah. I just enjoy my life. I'm happy. Like I do what I love for a living. I've got great prospects. I'm optimistic. I'm in good shape. I'm healthy, and I'm helping people every day with stuff. So I'm happy. Why would I take drugs? Like I wouldn't want to. And also I wouldn't want to lose control. I like control. I like to be aware of my situation and my actions. So I don't like to, like, when I see someone who's, I live in the UK where people drink a lot, right? And on any Friday night, Saturday night, and you're seeing drunk people stumbling around, just acting like complete idiots. And I'm just like, I don't know. There's something about that just makes me mad. I do not want to be that. I don't want to be that person, right? I want to have, I like to have agency. I don't want to do something stupid. And then my excuse is, oh, I was drunk. It's like, well, you chose to drink.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people drink intentionally so they can do things that they want to do, and then it gives them an excuse, right? So
I think so too. I've seen it happen. I've seen people, oh, so-and-so cheated on their girlfriend. Oh, but he was drunk. I'm like, that's not an excuse, right? Did someone pin him down and force him to drink? No. So,
right.
You gotta, I don't know. I'm huge on personal responsibility. Like I'm a personal responsibility, like super advocate.
Yeah. So, actually, oddly enough, it's my wife that's in chat that's asking this, or mentioning this, but she's saying China is like that as well. I think she means the kind of morally conservative culture, which maybe is responsible for maybe one of the reasons why Asians tend to come to the West and perform really well, because they don't.
Yeah, they're going to take over the world.
I think so. She's taken over the house, but I don't know about anything other than that. So, I've been wanting to have a conversation with Keri about abortion.
Okay.
But I'm going to have a conversation with you about abortion because it's in the zeitgeist right now. For some reason, abortion is like suddenly an issue again. It kind of went away as an issue.
Yeah, it's good. I'm
but
glad people are talking about it.
Yeah, no, me too. And you and I disagree in that. I believe, you're a Christian, right? I think.
I am, yeah, but that has no bearing on my view on abortion.
So that's what I thought was super interesting because I'm an atheist, and when you said your Christianity had no bearing on your position, it was fascinating to me because I'm an atheist, people expect me to be totally pro-abortion right up until the moment of birth, or apparently even after birth now in Virginia, and I'm not, and I think it's actually a complex issue. What's your perspective on abortion? And I'm asking because it's not. I get the religious perspective, right? But not a lot of people talk about it from a non-religious perspective who aren't also on the left.
Yeah, I think that's actually a mistake. I think that what the pro-life movement, if you want to call it that, actually needs is, I think atheists are probably the best people to have on board with it, because a lot of people assume that it's purely a religious argument, and it's like it's really not. It's
Right.
like it's very very much based in science and biology and ethics and rationality, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I used to be, I guess you could say, pro-choice just by default, as in it wasn't something I thought about. It wasn't something I thought about. It wasn't something I really had any reason to think about. And I kind of just, I never sat down and did the research and listened to the different arguments very well. Yep. And once I did that, I want to say it took me less than an hour to switch and become pretty staunchly pro-life as well. Like not just passively, like quite vocally, like, whoa, like what are we doing?
Are you pro-life from conception or from some time frame? Like, do you have a line that you draw during gestation?
Like it's no, not really, because life does begin at conception.
Yes, life absolutely begins.
Yes,
that's
yeah,
arguable.
Well, people try to. But that's a fact. Obviously, a zygote is not a person it's a human life. It's a unique human life as well. A new human life has been created. I wouldn't say that it's a person, because that wouldn't be factually correct according to every, there's no question. I mean, it's such a complicated subject, because it is a obviously it's a life is on a scale of progress. So you go from a zygote until an elderly person who eventually dies of natural causes, right? But throughout that whole process, it's the same human life. Yep. Same human life. Like if we rewound the tape of any of our lives, it will start when that sperm meets that egg and creates that unique DNA code, which, if left to its natural, if left to nature's intention, is going to create you, is going to create me, is going to create that individual, that unique life. So for that reason, I would say I am pro-life from conception, because if at any of those life stages that life were terminated, then that life is terminated. It doesn't matter whether it was at 2 weeks, at 8 weeks, at 20 weeks. It's the same human life. It's the same person or potential person.
Right.
So that's generally my position, and I think it's wrong to take an innocent life. Someone can say that's a religious view. I mean, 100% of atheists generally agree with me on that one.
Yes,
so,
that's a pretty normal view, I think.
Yeah. I think it's wrong to intentionally take an innocent human life. Period. And so, to be logically consistent, I would say that I'm pro-life from the very beginning. because anything else is, yeah, I mean, it rationally doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't quite make sense to me. I've thought, it's something I've thought about a lot. Like I've thought about a lot, and I've spent times, you know, I've looked at what the data is, you know, where things develop at different stages, what the different processes are. I've, much to my chagrin, actually like watched an abortion procedure, which I really like. I'm glad I did, but kind of wish I hadn't, because
yeah, you don't want that image in your head. It's not
no, you don't. But
yeah.
It makes it even more ridiculous, some of the arguments that people come with when they're trying to say that this is not it's like, I just saw a baby get dissected, so you're not going to tell me that's not that wasn't a human being, because it clearly was. So I think the issue with the debate is people get stuck on slogans and obfuscation and euphemisms, and I do honestly think that is because the pro-life position, the facts back the pro-life position, as far as I'm concerned. So I think it's in the pro-choice or pro-abortion people's benefit to try to obfuscate the facts or try to use linguistic terms. So it's not a baby, it's a fetus. I mean, fetus literally means unborn offspring, right? You're a fetus literally until you're born. You're technically a fetus. So, you know, and some languages use the same word for fetus and baby, right? It's literally just,
well, no, some even refer to it. It's often referred to as like there's like shit, what is it? The trimesters start, so they're like it's like 4 trimesters and it starts at 0, right?
Okay.
And 4 trimesters makes no mathematical sense, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think some cultures start your your birthday is your conception day, and like you're considered.
Okay. Yeah, which makes sense. Because by the time you're born, you're actually 9 months old, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes logical sense. So, yeah, I mean, that's my position. It's a very straightforward position. I think it's wrong to intentionally take another human being's life. And it's a human being. It's a human life. So
yeah,
it's just 1 + 1 = 2 for me.
I wish we were having this. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and I'm yet to. I have this discussion more often than I'd like to, but I do think it's an important discussion, so I'm happy to have it. And yeah, I've never seen a pro-choice argument that can morally contest with that, to be honest with you. I mean, all the arguments I hear, they're just not. I just don't think they're good arguments, and some of them are just factually wrong. Lots of them are just factually wrong, and then lots of them are. I'm like, okay, if that's your position, that's your position, but I just think that's immoral. Just in the same way I would think that slaying a newborn is immoral, right? You know, there might be there are people who think that in some situations that would be okay to kill a newborn. There's some people who think that, but I'm not going to agree with them. I'm going to be like, no, I just think that's wrong. Just like, you don't kill people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's. I wish we were having this discussion from a secular perspective in the culture generally, because I'm an atheist, and actually I'm kind of okay with some ambiguity. I'm actually I have a slightly different perspective on abortion than you do, but similar. And I think when I look at it, I see the pro-life people basically tend to conflate it with their religious beliefs and basically just say, well, it's, you know, there's a soul gets implanted at.
You know what? People say that. I don't see pro-life people coming with religious arguments.
You don't?
No, certainly not now. Maybe like 15 or 20 years ago, they used to entangle them a lot more. But most pro-life, most pro-life people, like I see a lot of pro-choice people saying that, oh, this is a religious, you know, this is just, and I'm like, have you ever spoken to a pro-life person? Because most
maybe that's an old.
The pro-life argument is not it's not religious.
Okay.
There will be individuals who entangle it because they might. You've got some people who entangle religion and everything. I'm a religious person. I do believe in God, but I don't make any religious arguments if we're talking about something that's, you know, practical or political or moral or whatever, because that's not that's like an argument from authority, right? If you don't believe in the Bible, I'm not going to quote the Bible to you because it's irrelevant, right? Work. Just like if someone quotes the Quran to me, I'm not going to take that as You know, so I think those arguments, I think they kind of undermine the cause, to be honest with you. I think you can have it completely secular bioethical argument and just or debate and discussion, and I think that's where it should be. But sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No. I agree with you. It should be a secular bioethical debate, and so maybe I'm wrong about what I see in the pro-life. It's probably based on my past experiences in the pro-life movement. When I was younger, I was in the Christian pro-life camp.
Sure.
But I definitely see it from the pro-choice side. I see kind of a religiosity there where it's, it's a woman's body, it's her choice, and there's no
nuance.
There's no nuance, and there's no discussion of like, yeah, but it's a baby, right? Like 2 seconds before birth, what's the difference?
They actually call it a parasite.
No, that's because it's not in their favor too. That's the problem. Like it's not. This is the thing. I mean, that's why. I mean, like I said, I used to be by default pro-choice, and then when I forced myself to engage with it properly, I found that I could not morally rationalize that position in light of better arguments and facts. I just couldn't. I either had to be like, okay, well, it's okay to. You either have to go with it's not a baby, or you go with.
It's okay to kill babies.
It is a baby, but it's okay to kill them sometimes if it's convenient.
And both of those are pretty horrible.
Exactly. And I think people subconsciously recognize that, which is why there's the protective mechanism of, calling it a fetus, right? They'll lots of pro-choice people get really angry if you say baby, right? So they'll say fetus. And I'm like, fetus just means unborn baby. Like it's not, it's the same. It's the same person. It's the same person, right? When I was a fetus, I was literally the same person. If you offed me then, I wouldn't exist now, right? that goes for all of us. Like I was the same person, same DNA, same everything. My personality was already encoded. If you want to talk science, right? Like everything that makes me was already genetically encoded. When people say it's not a human, I'm like, well, if it's not a human, what is it? I mean, until a woman gives birth to a frog or a cat or something, it's obviously a human.
I agree. It is obviously human, and I think just from a secular perspective, and this is I've thought about it a lot too, and to me, there's the deep question that needs to be answered, which is why I think people want to avoid this question. Frankly, is where do rights come from? Because just to clarify my position, like. I think killing a zygote after a day is fine, but it is a human. It is human and it's an independent entity, but I don't think that we need to give it rights the day after it's conceived. But I think it's clearly wrong the day before it's born. And and we need to find there's a gray area in there. And I think we need to be having that discussion. That's, my opinion. I think we need to be having that discussion there.
The thing is nobody aborts zygotes, do they?
Right, that's the thing. Because most of the abortion is way after that.
Yeah,
that's right. There's the morning after pill. You can abort a zygote, right?
Well, there's different ones. Some of them prevent the.
They prevent implantation. That's right.
Some prevent implantation. Some prevent them even joining. I believe. I need to research that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, besides that, their actual. I mean, because obviously it's going to take several weeks before. Right. And by that stage, it's no longer a zygote. Technically, like it's grown to, start taking the form certainly of, I mean, after a couple of weeks, it is. I mean, if you look at what it looked like, it certainly
looks like a human.
It's just a very small. Yeah, it's just a very small human. Like it's small. It's very small. Yeah. But after I don't have a chart in front of me, but I mean after.
I think heartbeat is 6 weeks and like. I think 12 or 14 weeks or something is neurological activity. Like you're,
and I mean, and by that stage, by like 8-9 weeks, I mean, it's got head, hands, feet, right? It's like, that's no longer a microscopic 2-cell organism. That's like, it's which is why that's their, that's why I say my pro-life position being from conception. I know that can sound like. It can sound extreme, but it's kind of like it is the same life. It is the same human life. Like the further you go, the more barbaric the procedure, no question, right? The more like visually, mechanically grotesque way you're going to have to, kill this thing, kill this person. But it is the same human life. And then also, I mean, this is just, you know, in terms of the wider, more sort of pragmatic facts, is also the fact that, you know, it's people also talk about it like as if there's no other option. That's the
Yes.
problem, right?
Yes.
So
There's like a backlog of people wanting to adopt babies.
yeah, that it's you know, you've got, I mean, that's why it's you know, again, you know, so much stuff is wordplay. Lots of pro-choice people like to use the term anti-choice for pro-life, right?
Right.
Anti-choice. And it's like, no one's anti-choice. Like, okay, abstinence is a choice. Having sex with contraception is a choice, and within that choice, you've got like 20 different choices, from the pill to condoms to you know,
Yep.
as an IUD. You know, you've got lots of different
Yep.
contraceptives, and they work. It's not like it's not
Sure.
like we're in the Middle Ages where there's no effective, like, contraception works really, really well. Like, it's really, really, if you don't want to get pregnant, like if you really don't want to get pregnant, it's really hard to. It's really hard to get somebody pregnant
Right.
if you really don't want to. And also I want to say that this is I say the exact same thing to men, right? I think men need to completely take responsibility as well. A lot of people think that, you know, I or other people are trying to like sort of pin this all on women, and that's not the case as well. Like, I will say the same thing to guys, like, you know, don't put that thing there without that thing on it unless you are ready and prepared to potentially, at least potentially, become a daddy, because, you know, we know where babies come from. So let's, you know, let's be grown adults here. And then after the fact, yeah, of course, you've got you know, you've got adoption is an option. You know, parenthood is an option. So as far as I'm concerned, you've got 4 options: abstinence, contraception, adoption, parenthood. I'm completely fine. I'm completely fine with all of those options. The only choice I morally oppose is killing, you know, killing the human life that's newly been created, by your own choice as
Right.
well, you know. And again, in the argument, people always jump to the rape case, and it's always
But
like,
two
you
wrongs
know,
don't make
that
it right. That case is not even. You don't even need to talk about rape. That's not a.
no, it's just to derail the conversation, because
Yeah.
that's not. I'm talking about, like, look, okay, let's look at the 98% of cases, and then we can
Right.
talk about the 2%.
People
Okay.
love to go to emergency ethics when they want to distract you from the main issue.
Exactly. It would be like if we were discussing if murder is right, if killing people in general is right or wrong, and I'm like, oh well, what if they have a gun to your head?
Right. What if you
And
go
then
back in time and it's Hitler and he
and
hasn't
then
done anything wrong yet? It's like, all
and
right.
then I try to use that. I try to use the self-defense clause to then justify murder in general.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it's like to me. So it's like, okay, well, if that's I get that situation, but that
Oh,
doesn't
right.
then
Right.
mean that, you know, everything else is right. If I just go and, you know, if I just go and, you know, sleep with some woman with no protection, no consent, and we you know, conceive a child, and then, you know, we both just decide, oh, like, let's just get rid of, like, that's not moral. Right.
Right.
I made that choice, she made that choice, this is the result, and you're now, you know, sacrificing the result to, well, it's not even a sacrifice really, you know,
Right.
killing the results to kind of offload your own personal responsibility.
For
And I think,
convenience. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's you know, I think it's you know, philosophically, I think it's, I also just think that the thing that puzzles me about it is, I feel like in a lot of ways society has moved forward, right? We've become a lot more less, you know, you look at history, people used to be very barbaric, right? We've become a lot
Right. We
less.
hit our kids less. We.
Yeah, we've become a lot more barbaric, a lot more
Yeah.
conscious in a lot of other areas. I mean, even the rise in vegetarianism and veganism and all that kind of stuff. And I get that, but to me, the huge thing there, which always just strikes me, is the abortion issue, especially because most people who are vegan or vegetarian will line up on the pro-choice side. And
Which is so baffling.
which boggles my mind, because I would get it, like, if you were like saying, okay, you know, it's wrong to kill animals, we shouldn't be killing and eating animals unnecessarily, and we also shouldn't be, you know, killing people at any stage, you know, either, then to me that would, like, from my moral matrix anyway, like, that would line up fine. Like, I'd be like, okay, I get that.
Right.
But that dissonance there, I just find very confusing. You know, you'll have
I
someone
think I
who's
know where
saying,
it comes from.
yeah,
there's a book by Peter Singer. Do you know this book? I forget the name of it, but it basically argues that rights come from the ability to suffer.
Okay.
And so I think the argument goes, the animals that we're eating can suffer, but a fetus cannot, which is true for a zygote, maybe. Definitely not true for most of the abortions that happen. So,
and I mean, what if you anesthetize the animal first? Would that be okay?
Right. Yeah. Great question. Right. That's an awesome question. Well, yeah. What if you just inject them with heroin and they die blissfully in a some
or a human for that matter? I mean, can we just lethal injection? I don't think is painful. What if you just
right. Yeah. Which is why I don't think that's where rights come from. But I believe that's their position and that's their justification. But I think we need to be having the discussion though, because look, we're not far away from there being in vitro fertilization and carrying a child all the way to term outside of a mother.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. I mean, viability keeps moving earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you went back in history when medicine, even 100 years ago, when medicine wasn't so good, or even in lots of developing countries, the point of viability is different from location to location. Again, it's the same human life. So if someone says, well, it's viability, and it's like, well, viability is going to be different in the middle of Alabama to New York City, right? Or LA. Like, if you're a rich person in LA and you've got access to great hospitals, you could probably have a baby born at 22 weeks and survive. Whereas if you're in a village in India, 22 weeks, no chance of survival. But again, it's the same. Again, being morally and logically consistent, it's the same human life.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
Yeah, that's what literally this is all where my position comes from, because I'm yet to. I mean, it's a hard debate. It's a hard discussion to even have without someone trying to, the accusations just flying and
Sure. You're already a bigot. Hell, for all I know, this makes you a white supremacist somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, well, certainly a misogynist. Certainly, I hate women because I wish there were more of them. But it's all I wish people could just disengage the emotion from the emotions and the euphemisms and mantras a little bit. Just my body, my choice, my body, my. It's like, I'm not talking about your body.
Right.
this is like, I'm not actually right. Yes, I understand in biology across all mammals, it is the female that carries offspring. Like we all know this. I understand that. Right. However, we're not talking about your kidneys or your liver or I mean, even with this, I don't know, like in the States, I've seen they've got the Georgia heartbeat bill that was passed recently, which is why the conversations come out, which I think is great. I'm glad it's created the conversation. But I mean, even with that, again, if you're just being logical and rational, you're literally talking about a heartbeat, right? It's a heartbeat, okay? And then someone is saying, my body, my. I'm like, so you have two heartbeats, right? There's another. If there's another heartbeat, this is clearly another human life. Like
they call them parasites, though. I think the leftists call them parasites.
It's unbelievable. Like it does make me just sort of like shake my head, because I'm just, like, especially, this is the weirdest thing, right? If it were like the far righties who were like, like super pro, like, like coming up with these arguments and stuff,
right?
It would almost make more sense to me, because it's like, okay, well, you kind of don't really.
Well, and they would be mocked mercilessly by everyone else.
It's like you don't really. You're not generally trying to say you're standing for the good of humanity as a whole, are you? But for the people who are, for them to be so like gung-ho on pushing for like last minute abortions and stuff, I'm like, wait, so why do you care about, all these other things, and you're trying to come across as all compassionate and, we want to fight for every human life, and then when it comes to the unborn, it's just like, screw them. And I don't understand that, especially because we've all been through that process. That's the thing. Like everyone who exists, everyone involved in this conversation, we were there. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm like, we were there, and I mean,
there've been studies like, because I'm a dad, and like the ingestation the baby actually recognizes the dad's voice and the mom's voice, and like there's like learning happening pre-birth. And it seems ridiculous to base moral arguments on, you can't have a moral argument based on an event like birth, because birth may not always exist, as we talked about, in the future, right? And you can't really I don't think you can really have it based on viability either, because viability is just a modern state of science. Those aren't moral lines in the sand to draw anywhere. So I don't know. I think we need to have it from a moral perspective, that discussion, and we're just not having that at all.
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, I'm glad that it's coming to light. I mean, in my trigonometry interview that I did last month, I mean, that was literally the last point that I brought up, because they did ask me what I think the biggest blind spot in society is, the thing that is there but nobody's talking about. And I did say, you know, I was in two minds about whether or not I should say it. And I don't normally ever censor myself, but I was like, yeah, abortion, man. Like, I just,
well, you get a lot of hate for it, probably, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, sure. But you know, it's that's fine. Like, it's fine. I mean, I said in that interview, I mean, I imagine that I obviously wasn't around during the time of the abolition of slavery, but I made that comparison that I do think that that was probably how some of those early abolitionists kind of like felt, as in like, gosh, this
my
thing
slave, my choice. Was that their argument, or what?
Yeah, it was. Well, my body, my choice. Well, yeah, my body, my choice. It was the same, you know, this is not a human being. It's the same thing that led to the, you know, lots of genocides, right? This is not a human being. So, I mean, if it's not a human being, logically, you can, you know, you can do what you want. I've seen, you know, you mentioned the term parasite. Sure. I've heard people say it's the same as removing a tumor or
right.
And I'm just
because your tumor will someday go to MIT.
Yeah, and your tumor is your child. You know, it's not even that it's you know, a random human. It's also like, you know, from a moral perspective. I mean, we all know that people naturally and morally want to protect their own, you know, children or brothers and sisters, and you know, people, family, essentially. And that's why this sort of callousness strikes me even harder, because you're not even saying like this is some completely foreign like body that has you know, that some completely foreign body or something. It's like, no, that's like your potential, that's your son or daughter. And again, being consistent, you know, if you see a pregnant woman, no one asks, oh, how's your fetus doing?
Right.
How's your clump of cells? Oh,
how's that tumor coming along?
Nobody does that. So, you know, nobody does that. And so it's just, and you know, and no one would, you know, suggest a pregnant woman drinks alcohol or goes bungee jumping or takes, you know, everyone's like, no, because you know that not necessarily for her own sake. You can bungee jump like later, but everyone recognizes, oh, there's another life there. We want to preserve this life. Again, similar in law, if someone kills a pregnant woman, it's a double homicide, as I think it should be. If a terrorist incident happens and there's a pregnant woman, the unborn will be listed as a casualty. So the lack of consistency in these things, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, if it's a human life, it is a human life. It can't just be like, it's a human life when I feel like it, and then when I don't feel like it, it's not. Like, that doesn't.
So what do you think the motivation is? Because I find it hard to believe that all of these people really just they're like closet mass murderers.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
What's the motivation?
I mean, I do think that, so the thing with the abortion argument, the two sort of real positions are based on two different types of framing. So you have the human rights framing, which is everything that I've been speaking from. So, you know, human life is valuable and should be protected and preserved. It's, you know, what I believe from A to Z. So that's that frame. There's the human rights frame, and then there's the women's rights frame. Okay, so the women's rights frame is based on total, absolute female bodily autonomy. This will be especially with the people who, you know, most pro-choice people, but, you know, especially the people who think that even third trimester, you know, what at any point it should be a woman's right to.
Well, why not just abort your kindergartner if they're a pain in the ass? I mean, what?
Well, I mean, I think their logic is that they are the unborn child is inside them and is being sustained from their bodily resources, shall we say? Which is,
but again, not necessary. Could be viable outside. Right?
Yeah,
A
yeah, but
baby requires the mom too, but
yeah, potentially, yeah, that's true. Which is again why I don't, but that frame doesn't really work for me. Like I do understand, I can understand where it's coming from. I just don't think the problem is that it completely overlooks the second life. It completely overlooks the second life. So most of the time it won't even be talked about, right? They won't even use the term fetus. Sometimes they'll just say terminate the pregnancy,
right.
right? If you go on some
As if it's a
abortion
condition.
websites, the word baby will not be anywhere. The word fetus will not be anywhere. They say we remove the pregnancy. That's the terminology they use. We'll remove the pregnancy.
But what are they getting emotionally out of it? Like, why? What's the emotional payoff for having that position? Because it requires cognitive dissonance. It
It
requires
does.
avoiding this tough conversation. But why? Why have it? What's the big emotional payoff? I don't know the
Well,
answer. I'm just asking.
I think it's a pragmatic payoff. I think it's just people don't like responsibility, right? I mean, this goes for both men and women, right? It would be in my favor, right? If I were a promiscuous guy who was single, then it would be in my favor to be like pro-choice, because then I can go around and sleep with lots of different women and not be particularly cautious. And if something doesn't go right, then we can just get rid of the result before anyone
Not your problem.
notices.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's that bigger crisis we're having that we kind of talked about earlier, about people not wanting to take responsibility for anything. And I think that is sad. I think that is degenerate. I don't think that's the direction we really want to be going in, right? I don't know if that's I think liberalization is good, but to me, like hyper liberalization of any society, things can go too far where things just become so decadent and people become so self obsessed that they can't even recognize the fact of what is actually going on here, so I think that's really what it is. I think the main thing is just the wanting to absolve responsibility, wanting to have an easy way out, essentially wanting to have an
Yeah.
easy way out. And I can understand that from I think that there are lots of practical and convenience arguments in favor of abortion, no question, right? If I'm not ready to become a dad and I impregnate a woman, there are practical and convenience reasons why it would be in my favor to end that life, terminate that
Yep.
pregnancy, right? However, morally, I can't justify that from a moral position. And again, that's not based on, someone could cite the Bible for that, but that's not a religious perspective. That's just saying no, like it's not. And to me, to me, it would be the same thing as like, okay, like you've already got a kid, and it might be practical. There are lots of things that could be practical and convenient that we could do, that would be morally abhorrent, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you can think of a few, right? Oh, you've got a
Yeah.
homeless.
Of course.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever seen, like, I don't really watch TV or series, but I saw that movie, The Purge. Have you ever seen
Oh,
that?
I think I saw that
Thing
years
on
ago.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that whole idea started because they had like a problem with like homelessness and vagrancy and stuff like that. So they had
Right.
like this thing where once a year, like those people just get killed off.
Yep.
Okay. And then society runs better because they don't have to deal with all these people who are like a drain on the thing. Like
Right.
that's very Nazi-esque, right? Nazi Germany, they had they had propaganda where they would show disabled people, and they'd have how many Reich marks, like how much money it was costing the government to sustain that life. And their logic was like, let's just eugenics, right? Let's just
Yep.
we don't want these people. And so it's a very dangerous and extremely dodgy moral territory as far as I'm concerned, once you start kind of venturing into those ideas of like, oh well, yeah, the kid's got Down syndrome, should we just it's like,
Right. There's a parallel there directly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's just very dark. It's very, very dark. And maybe that's a direction society wants to go in, but I think that's something that people should be very wary of, and which you could learn from history and be like, once you start dehumanizing any segment of the population, it doesn't, you're not in good moral territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's we promised we wouldn't keep you too long.
Yeah. No
and
worries. I did
think we
message the
lied.
guy. I did
So,
message the guy who I'm podcasting with to let him know I'd be running a little bit late, so it should be
So
okay.
why don't we just wrap it up and let you, first of all, Keri wants you to know that thank you very much, and she's sad she didn't get to talk with you, and she promises that the tech problems were not an elaborate ruse to get you to invite her onto her podcast. Onto your podcast. So, but how can people? I guess two questions for you at the end. One is, anything else that you any message that you wish we had gotten to that you want to tell people about, and two, how can people follow you, and where do you want them to follow your work? What should they do?
No problem. So no big message except be good to one another and have these conversations. Be open-minded. I'd also like to let people know that my first fitness book, Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody, is now available on Gumroad. You can find a link to that on my website, zubymusic.com. And if you want to follow me on social media, I definitely recommend following me on Twitter if you don't already, at Zuby Music. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. All of them are Zuby Music, ZUBY Music, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, look, really appreciate you coming on, man. It was an awesome conversation. I feel like I've got a whole list of like white privilege, racism with a cuddle, like a whole bunch of stuff you've talked about that I want to talk about with you at some point in the future. But I really, really appreciate your generosity with your time. Good luck in the future. And I'm going to start listening to more rap because of you. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
Check out
Take
the new
care.
album, Perseverance. Cheers.